Well, Andrew, it's really nice to sit down and talk with you, and I know we're having some fun off air. You have vast experience, education, a new book that just came out, Freedom to Fail. I want to start there. I think that concept of the freedom to fail and failure is really compelling, especially when you add the layer of education. Why that book for you at this time?
Well, when I think about my experience with failure and like how I came to kind of wrestle with it as like from a child to an adult, I am a gamer first and foremost. Like I played video games when I was a kid, Super Mario Brothers, all the way up to like role-playing games. And one of the elements of games that always fascinated me is that you will fail in a game. Like you will, like you're jumping Mario and you're gonna fall into a pit, and you're probably gonna die a couple times. But what games don't do is they don't really punish you for that. Like you try again, you keep going. Even Tetris, where eventually you will lose that game. You can't beat the game. You just beat yourself, so to speak, and get better at it. And what I noticed is I loved that part about games. Like it engaged me, and I thought, why is it that schools and systems in schools don't do that? Oftentimes we punish kids on the first try. For example, okay, take this quiz. It's great. It goes into the grade book, and that's it. And so even if, let's say you learn later, you learn from that experience. Oh, I didn't do so well. I might try again. I'm sure many of us have had that experience in school where we were not given the opportunity to, quote unquote, fail forward and learn from the experience. So I wrote the book to kind of give teachers strategies around, how to do this in a practical way, what gets in the way, everything from, instructional strategies, but also like assessment practices and how we can kind of merge those two to create an environment where failure is just a part of the learning experience, not the end of it, so to speak.
I'm glad you brought up assessment, because now we live in a world where accountability is discussed on a daily basis for both teachers and students, and schools for that matter, and districts, and rankings. How do we practice failure in an environment that is now so heavy on data and accountability?
Right. I think when I think about the structures of accountability, and it's not something that's necessarily going to go away, and so we kind of have to, you're right, find what can we do, and within those structures. I think we need to rethink what data is. Data, yes, are things like test scores, but data is also those on-the-spot formative assessments that we do all the time with kids. That's data that's going to inform my instruction tomorrow. And so thinking about that in terms of accountability, are teachers using that data to move forward? Not just what is the data. Data is useless unless you do something with it. I can look at the test scores of my students from last year and great. If I don't do anything with that, then why did we do it in the first place? So I think that we have to reframe what data is and how we use it. And that an assessment means assessment. It doesn't mean grade. You know what I mean? Assessment is a word that sometimes gets hijacked and automatically is, oh, it will be set in stone like we write A and that is it. And assessment is simply, where are you and where are you going? Where will we go next? Not necessarily, you have an A and we're done.
Andrew, can we practice that with the failing forward piece with educators? I mean, when we talk about data, there are folks out there that say, it's a little dirty secret that a lot of educators they haven't been taught how to read data. And even when you put it up, that they're looking at different things and it may not be accurate. And I just wonder, I guess I would be concerned from the public side of it, are we providing opportunities for teachers in that area, as an example, so that they can learn from their own mistakes in reading data, because it's coming at them in droves? And it's a false assumption to think that they're just going to pick it up and that they had the training to learn that along the way.
I completely agree. I mean, a lot of my work recently has been working with teachers directly in formative assessment. I mean, I get a lot of calls to go out and work with teachers because, yeah, I mean, not only from the large kind of, maybe you would call them global data, like let's look at a grade level, let's look at school data, but just like I said, the daily practice of what do I do with this information? Like, how do I differentiate? Frankly, how do I collect data and not make it an overwhelming thing? So, and there are different ways to check for understanding, right? There are those more test-driven, which are, bubble filling in long, short answers. But there are other formative assessments include, graphic organizing, organizers, exit tickets, movement-based activities. From that, you can uncover what your students know or don't know and make decisions on that. So I think you're right. I think there's definitely a need for that, like training or professional learning. And again, professional learning that isn't just one stop, like it has to be an ongoing practice. There has to be looking. So if you're doing data, you got to be looking at it all the time. Not just, okay, we did our professional development on data and now you got it, don't you?
On to the next thing.
Yeah, on to the next thing.
Yeah.
If you're going to focus on it, really focus on it and take some time and I think figure out immediately how it applies to teaching and learning, not just, oh, let's read data. It really should be framed from the so what of.
It's creating that culture. And I know you've talked about creating a culture of risk takers. Mm-hmm. Tell me about that with regards to students.
I think a lot of that is, there's a lot of things that you can do to create that culture. I mean, some things are, first of all, you have to create just a welcoming culture in your classroom. Like if students don't feel welcome, they're not going to engage in anything you do. If they don't feel like the place is safe to learn, I mean, if we're talking about the whole child, all those aspects and tenets, I think also that you have to build relationship and trust. So if students are going to take risks, they really have to trust me that it's a safe place to do that. You can't just, oh, sure, Mr. Miller, I'll take a risk. But do they really trust me? Something that I always do with, the kids that are maybe harder to break through to because there's a barrier there is just getting to know them on a regular basis on things that don't have to do with school. Finding ways to connect with them. And other things teachers need to do are do activities where students actually take risks and learn from that. STEM design challenge, project-based learning units, things where I do an activity a lot of times with teachers where they do a sketch of something and we talk about how did you all do well the first time, and we kind of go, everyone kind of goes, well, sort of, not really, right, so could you do better if we maybe had some art instruction, and so activities like that really do help build a culture, I think, for risk taking. But like I said, there's other factors too, like grading and assessment, that you have to make sure match the culture too.
Now, your background is interesting because you've worked not just here in the U.S. Mm-hmm. Tell me about those experiences overseas and how they've impacted your ability to then work with educators and leaders here.
Right. So yeah, I've had the privilege of working with teachers across the globe, it's interesting because, you think going into a foreign country, we'll say, you think, oh, I wonder what's different here. And what I find is we're all the same. The same struggles and challenges exist everywhere. When I was in India, accountability was, yes, testing. Everyone's freaking out about that. When I was in China, same thing. So it really helped me to kind of that aha moment of, wow, we're all in this together and we're all struggling with the same struggles and challenges of the profession, And so I think that's helped to kind of affirm that the work we're doing is good work, and also allows me to kind of make those connections. And how are teachers in China, for example, wrestling with this? Are they doing it in a unique way, and what can we learn from that experience here? So, like I said, there's those commonalities. There's slight differences, but I find it's just interesting that we're all struggling with the same issues.
Are we doing a good job here of taking that information from outside of the U.S. and applying it? Because I've had conversations, they're always interested outside of the U.S. in what we're doing here, but I don't tend to hear the same conversations here about what's going on externally.
I agree. I think there needs to be more work there. I think there needs to be more exchanges. You're right. You see a lot of people coming in to see what we do. But I think it's great to go and visit and see what other teachers are doing, and yes, there are those things we're all we might be doing something the same or different, whether it's an initiative or some sort of practice, but I think there could be a lot more learning across culture.
What topic in education is on your mind that you haven't been reading about that you think is coming down the pike?
Ooh, that's a really good question. So something that isn't really in the literature, if you will. I'm interested in blended professional development. There's a lot of work in blended learning. There's a lot of work in professional development, some great stuff, like what is good, what is not good. But I haven't seen those two coalesce in a way where somebody is writing about what are some great ways to implement blended professional learning. And the reason I'm interested in it is that I'm seeing more and more that being an option for teachers, schools, and districts, right? And there's some benefits to that. You know, blended learning, you get to learn at your own pace, right? It's a little more personalized. You can learn at home, at school. There's, you know, it's, you know, more flexible. And to be honest, it probably costs a little less because you don't have to fly somebody out. But then we also know the in-person stuff is just as important, you know, for the learning. I've taught in online learning and blended learning, and I know how important that personal connection is. So I'm interested to see what happens there as we move forward and try blended professional learning more and more. What can we learn from that experience? So I'm hoping to see research, data, writing on that.
Are you seeing the business community in education follow along that line? Because you're right, I've heard a lot of obviously blended learning and PD, and we've seen money follow both. But I don't know if I've personally seen sort of that combination. Have you seen that from the business side of education?
I think so. I think
Okay.
when I think of, I mean, even ASCD, they offer the in-person piece, but they offer the virtual tools as well. Whether you're talking PD online, you're talking webinars, you're talking in-person. So even ASCD understands that this is part of the conversation now. But I've seen other companies when I go to different conferences, they're you know, the advertisement for, you know, you can take this online course about this instructional move or strategy, or watch these videos on this. So I think it is, you know, more and more they're seeing it as a need and as a legitimate way to learn, you know. But again, blended, not just online. I think that's the key.
Let's close with this. I would love to hear your advice for those young people that are contemplating a path in education. What advice do you have for them with regards to what the profession is, what it can be for them, and maybe what it is not?
Well, I think about my own experience, and I'm not one of those people that join teaching, like, you know, some people say, I'm going to be a teacher. They just know.
That wasn't you?
It was not me. For me, it was, I was a big nerd and I studied, and I ended up taking some education courses, you know, like the history of schools and, you know, basic curriculum instruction. And what I found is that I really loved learning about the process of schooling and learning. So if I was to say something to young people, I would say, you can't just love kids. You know, you can't just want to be a teacher. You have to love learning about learning. You have to want to do that, to read books, to go online, to, you know, kind of, as I say, nerd and geek out to that stuff. I mean, I think that that's, because what that leads to is that leads to, you know, taking risks in the classroom with kids, trying out new things, feeling competent that what you're doing with kids is the right thing, and not just kind of, I hope this is, you know, what I'm doing is right, but, you know, affirming what you do. I think, I'm a learner. I feel like teachers are learners, and so you know, fostering that as a new teacher, like, come into the profession as a learner, learn from your colleagues, learn from what's out there.
Blended professional learning.
There-
We're gonna look for that.
It's gonna, you know, maybe write a book about it, right? Maybe write a book about it. Yeah.
Good luck on the new book.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.